The world before I died was an architectural construct forged from cold data streams, glass and steel skyscrapers standing at the heart of America's technological plains. My name was Julian. For 35 years of a hurried human existence, I was a virtual space architect, a man who lived within three-dimensional coordinate grids, obsessed with the perfection of every pixel, every user interface, every geometric block. I didn't die from some heroic tragedy, but from the ruthless erosion of the modern age. A stroke struck me down right in the middle of my apartment, bathed in the blue light of dozens of monitors, as I was struggling to render a massive simulated world project. My heart stopped beating, but my mind, already so accustomed to molding unreal spaces, did not dissipate. It sank into a dense, endless void. In the absolute darkness of death, I saw neither heaven nor hell. I saw an interface. It floated in the void, brilliantly glowing and minimalist, exactly like the systems I used to design. A soundless line of text scrolled across my consciousness. Asterisk target world structure has collapsed. Evolutionary chain severed. Architect required to reboot the source code. Authorizing access. Master canvas. Asterisk. I clicked accept with a mere thought, and in that very moment, my soul was sucked through a tunnel of space and time, tearing through all laws of physics to plummet into a place without a name. The first sensation that hit me when I opened my eyes was a primitive, rough scent, a pungent mix of damp earth, rotting leaves, and thorny tree sap. The darkness of this era was unlike the absence of light in modern rooms. It was a thick, living, and menacing darkness. I pushed myself up, realizing I was lying on a sticky bed of moss. Surrounding me was a gigantic forest, absurdly colossal in its scale. Tree trunks hundreds of meters tall, with roots coiling like giant stone pythons, driving deep into the earth. Dense fog hung suspended among the canopy. There was no sky, no moon or stars, only a suffocating atmosphere, reeking of sulfur and lurking danger. I dragged my feet toward the sound of rushing water nearby, kneeling beside a stream, as still as a ribbon of black silk. I leaned over. The face reflected in the rippling water left me stunned. It was completely unchanged. There was no glamorous reincarnation into an alien entity, no divine muscular physique bestowed upon me. It was still those same hollow eyes, the same angular cheekbones, and features familiar down to the smallest detail. Despite having traversed millions of years of space, I retained Julian's face intact. Amidst the desolate grandeur of an unnamed era, this became a cruel psychological anchor. It reminded me that I still carried the entire memory, solitude, and mindset of a modern man. A heart-wrenching scream echoed from the distance, pulling me from my thoughts. Through the gaps in the massive foliage, I saw them. The first humans, or perhaps the most pitiful creatures, desperately clinging to the title of human. They huddled together in a chaotic mass beneath a shallow, rocky alcove. It was a tribe of about 20. Their bodies were emaciated and covered in sores, concealed only by torn animal skins and dry leaves. The flickering light from a dying fire cast harsh shadows on their gaunt, mud-smeared faces. Their sunken eyes overflowed with primal terror at the endless darkness besieging them from outside the cave. Their existence here was not survival. It was merely awaiting death. Void of language, they communicated only through broken grunts and the whimpering of skin and bone infants, freezing to death in their mother's arms. The thunderous footsteps of giant predators echoed from the forest edge, drawing closer by the second. Massive shadows glided past the trees, ready to tear them apart the moment the fire died out. Looking at those small, fragile beings, a wave of pity mixed with fury surged in my chest. If this was how humanity began, it was far too cruel. And then, the system within my mind awakened. The world before my eyes trembled. It wasn't a physical earthquake, but a fracturing of reality's very structure. Everything around me, the ancient trees, the rugged boulders, the debris on the ground, was suddenly overlaid with a brilliantly glowing, three-dimensional spatial grid. The world was no longer a solid mass of matter, but transformed into a colossal blueprint, composed of countless polygons, wireframes, and coordinate vertices. The system granted me limitless power, but it didn't operate on magic. It operated on structural logic. It allowed me to manipulate physical matter like digital puzzle blocks. I raised my hand toward the empty space in front of the alcove. From my palm, an invisible wave rippled outward. The surrounding boulders, the hardened clay beneath my feet, everything began to violently vibrate. They shattered at a molecular level, suspended in mid-air, and then began to recombine. In my mind, an architectural form was taking shape. The surrounding matter obeyed that will, binding together into solid, cubic blocks. They interlocked with absolute precision, like perfect pieces of a colossal puzzle block, leaving not even the slightest gap. A towering, curved wall, smooth as a monolithic block of concrete, pierced upward from the earth, encasing the tribe's entire sanctuary. The light from the fire cast upon the newly formed wall, creating a spatial boundary heavily steeped in cinematic aesthetics. The contrast was incredibly stark. Half the wall bathed in blinding, radiant light, while the other half sank into a deep, pitch-black shadow. Its flawlessly smooth surface stood imposing, sharp, and utterly dominant amidst this toxic primeval forest. Inside the newly protected space, all sounds of the wild beasts were completely severed. The bewildered primitive humans let go of one another. They slowly approached the wall, their rough, scar-riddled hands trembling as they touched a surface so flawless it felt unnatural. Then, in unison, they turned around, directing their gaze toward me, the man who had just stepped out of the night. They didn't run. They slowly fell to their knees, pressing their foreheads against the cold dirt. Not a single sound was made, not a single word was uttered, but that silence was the most deafening echo of all. It was absolute submission to a force beyond the comprehension of their species. I stood still, staring intently at my own hands. Rearranging matter was a simple task for a designer's mind, but reprogramming the cognitive architecture of an entire species would be the most painful and magnificent project I had ever undertaken. I would have to teach them language, Teach them the fire of life. Teach them how to forge mechanical gears from dust.